Hi guys, Bolt here, and we are back with more Broken Arrow tutorials. Now, we have previously covered the basics of the game, going from deck building, the description of all these icons, different weapon types of vehicles and infantry, how to use them on the battlefield. We also discussed recon, laser designation, and the use cases of these together with artillery and bombs. More specifically, artillery shells and bombs that can be laser guided, aka smart rounds. Now in this tutorial I'll be diving into airplanes, in a total overview of all the different types of airplanes, weaponry, use cases, and examples of them on the battlefield. So a disclaimer, I am in no way a military expert, and I have in fact never served, so the nomenclature I use might not be perfect to any military person watching this, so I will use words that simply make more sense in-game. Now, before I dive into the first category of planes, it is worth mentioning that the separation between different types of planes in this game is sometimes blurry, depending on the weaponry the planes can carry. So keep that in mind. Now, an air superiority fighter can in some cases also carry a bomb, but it's not the best usage of that type of plane. Speaking of air superiority fighter, let's start off by listing the main ones from the US and Russia, based mainly on general stats and also weaponry. Now for the US, we have the F-15EX Eagle, and it's arguably the best air superiority fighter on the US side, perhaps also in the game because of a couple of features. It has the maximum carry capacity for 20 AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles that will be fired in quick succession, and if the target is destroyed that you were targeting, the missiles will automatically go to the next one that you target. Now of course you can also go for a more mixed loadout that also includes sidewinders, which are able to target helicopters. You can also add cruise missiles or bombs to this plane, which will work just fine, but it would be like using a Ferrari to pull a truck. Now, the things that determine whether or not a plane will be a good fighter and survive the encounter is the speed, the air-to-air loadout that it can have, stealth, and the countermeasures it has available. Speaking of air-to-air missiles, in the US arsenal we have the AIM-9 Sidewinder, which is fire and forget, has a range of 2 kilometers and can be used against helicopters or airplanes. We have the AIM-7M Sparrow with a range of 5 kilometers against airplanes, and with this missile you need to keep lock on the target that you originally fired on, otherwise the missile will lose track and go to the next plane that you targeted. We have the AIM-120 AMRAAM, the AIM-174 and the AIM-260, which have a range of 7 and 9 kilometers respectively against airplanes only, and all of these are terminal guidance, which means in-game, which means that the moment you fire at a plane, you can turn your plane around and fly somewhere else. It is going to auto-lock to that plane, so it is technically fire and forget, but if you target a different plane, that missile will then redirect itself to your new target. So don't keep changing targets or the missiles will do funky stuff. Also, one very important detail is the speed of these missiles indicated at the bottom of that list. While the AIM-120 AMRAAM can go 4140 kilometers per hour, the maximum speed of the AIM-174 is only 2880. So also check that out, because that is essential depending on what you want to do with your missiles or your plane. If you wanted to do a dogfight, you might want very fast missiles to hit the enemy first before their missiles reach you. In this case, the F-15EX Eagle has basically no stealth, but if we move to the F-22 Raptor, we can see a stealth of 1.75, which is definitely worth it. When we look at the loadout of this plane, we also have the option to include bombs in our loadout, but it would be a total waste not to take the AIM-260 GATM air-to-air missiles, which has 9 kilometer range, and is one of the best missiles in the game. This plane is a good example of a plane that is leaning slightly more towards being an interceptor rather than an air superiority fighter. Now, it will fling missiles at the enemy planes, but it does not have a lot of them, so I would not recommend this plane for prolonged air-to-air combat if there's more than 1 or 2 planes out there, while the F-15EX can just stay in the fight and keep launching missiles. Next we have the F/A-18C Hornet. It has the same stealth as the F-15EX, but now we have a middle ground in terms of weaponry. While the F-15 cannot carry the AIM-174s, but carry a load of AMRAAMs, and the F-22, which can carry the AIM-260s, but not carry a lot of AMRAAMs, the F/A-18C Hornet can carry a couple of long-range AIM-174s without being low on AIM-120s. Now in this particular loadout we have 2 AIM-174s, we have 6 AMRAAMs, and we also have some sidewinders for close range engagements, But of course, you can also include more MRAMs if you want to go to a maximum of 10. Now, other planes can also be outfitted with air-to-air missiles, but I hope with these kind of examples, I made clear that what you should pay attention to is what you want to use the plane for and what the stats want you to use the plane for. Let's move on to long-range support. I can split the long-range support units into two categories. We have SEED, which stands for Suppression of Enemy Air Defense, or cruise missiles. SEED is a great way to have a direct counter against enemy anti-air that has its radar enabled. On the US side, the SEED missiles that are available to us are the AGM-88 Harm with 8 kilometers range and the AGM-122 Sidearm with 5 kilometers range, which can also be fired from the AH-1Z Viper helicopter, which is pretty cool. Now, the usage of these missiles, it's quite simple. You fly in your plane, and if there's an enemy anti-air unit with the radar turned on, the missile will automatically lock onto the target, and it is fire and forget, so you don't need to stick around after the missile is fired, you can immediately evacuate. The missile can, however, be intercepted by the anti-air itself, so it does pay to saturate the enemy anti-air by launching multiple missiles, possibly even from multiple airplanes. Now, the planes on the US side that carry SEED are the AV-8B Harrier, EA-6B Prowler, F-15EX Eagle, F-16 CJ, and the F-35. Now, when we move to long-range tactical support, we have cruise missiles to play with, and they can be launched from the B-52, B2 and the B1B Lancer, which can carry 20, 16 and 24 cruise missiles respectively. These planes can also carry regular bombs, but we will get to that in a minute. Other planes can also carry cruise missiles, but in much lower quantity. For example, the F-117 Nighthawk can only carry 2, the F-35 can also carry 2, F-15EX can carry 5 cruise missiles, F-A-18D Hornet can carry 2, and we of course also have nuclear bombs, which on the US side can be dropped from the B2 and B1. Now, these are gravity bombs, which means that the planes will have to fly over the target to drop the bombs, and it means that you might get shot down before you manage to drop it. The bombs, however, are not interceptable by anti-air, while the Russian nuclear warhead is mounted on a cruise missile, which can be intercepted. So there's kind of a flip side. So, having discussed air-to-air, SEED and long-range tactical missiles, let's move on to close-range bombs. Bombs definitely have a specific use case in Broken Arrow. Bombs can be the classical high explosives, which are good against anything they hit. For example, when we look at the F-15 Strike Eagle, we have the option for GBU-56 and 54 LJDAMs, which are smart bombs, and can be guided to the target by laser designation, as mentioned in my previous tutorials. Besides smart bombs, you also have the dumb bombs, such as the Mark 84 and 82. Now, you cannot guide these to the target with laser designation. As mentioned before in one of my tutorials, smart bombs, including cruise missiles, are dropped by pressing P the X amount of times you want to use a bomb. For example, if you have 4 bombs but you want to drop 2, press P twice and then left click on 2 targets. Now, this is the same when using cruise missiles. So cruise missiles are dropped with the precision strike, for which the hotkey is P, while smart bombs can be dropped by pressing P or K, which is the hotkey for a bombing run. Okay, I kept messing it up, so this is me in the middle of the night going through this again. So if you have a fighting falcon that has cluster bombs, for example, or regular dumb bombs, so these are non-laser guided, I want to drop them by doing a bombing run, and then you can designate the area you want it dropped on. So if we designate something like this, the plane is gonna come in, and because these are high drag bombs, it can drop it from a low altitude, and it's gonna drop right there. But if we have something like the F-35 that has smart munitions, it is a waste to use the bombing run when you do it via this method. It is better to use the precision strike, click it twice, and then give it 2 targets, for example, these 2. And then what the plane will do is it'll give a very, very corrected order to that bomb, and it'll drop right on top of that target. Like that. So to remember, precision strike, P, for munitions that are guided or that can be guided. Bombing run, L, for dumb bombs, so bombs that are not guided. And also for cruise missiles, you press P. So remember that. For strafing run, it's a whole other hotkey, which is K. And dragging it over the area it will target. Now, it'll use the weapons according to the units visible in that area. When we look at bombs, we also have high drag bombs or regular bombs. High drag bombs are dropped from a low altitude, while regular bombs are dropped from relatively high altitude. For example, the Snake Eye bombs allow your plane to be closer to the ground and perhaps out of line of sight of enemy anti-air, while regular bombs force your plane to be much higher up and probably within line of sight of enemy anti-air. Now, while there's tons of high explosive bombs in the game, we also have Cluster, which are great at destroying or otherwise heavily damaging armored vehicles in the game. It is by far the best way to quickly and severely damage an armored group of vehicles, since high explosive bombs don't really do a lot of damage if you don't hit in close proximity of that vehicle. Now, the type of bomb is designated up here, detailing whether it's a smart bomb, high drag bomb, cruise missile, etc, and the type of payload is also detailed here, whether it's a high explosive weapon or a cluster ammunition. So when it comes to air-to-air missiles on the Russian side, there's something interesting about them. There's a lot of different types of short-range air-to-air missiles that are mostly fire and forget. So if we start with the one that has the shortest distance, we start with the R-73. This one has 2 kilometer range, is fire and forget, so it's basically the Sidewinder. What we also have is the R-27ET, which is also fire and forget with 3 kilometers range. What we also have is the R-27ER, which is basically moving up there towards the AIM-7M Sparrow equivalent with 5 kilometers range. Then we have the R-77 with 7 kilometers range, basically the AIM-120 MRAM. And lastly, we have the R-37 with 9 kilometers range. So there's a lot of different types of missiles for short range. We have the R-73 with 2 kilometers, R-27ET with 3 kilometers, and R-27ER with 5 kilometers. So the 73 and the ET here, the R-27, these are all short range, both are fire and forget. If you can, obviously go for the R-27ET, but there's also some other differences, such as the maximum speed of this missile here being a bit slower than the R-27ET. So if you can, you really want to go for this one because it also does more damage. So there's a lot of statistics here to really look out for. In terms of short range, R-27ET is the best. For mid range, you have the R-77, which just makes most sense. And for long range, you only have the R-37. So that should kind of narrow down what you should try to aim for. But the best fighter on the Russian side arguably is the Su-35. And you can make this either a very long range engagement plane, so more of an interceptor, by adding R-37s there and also adding them over here. And then over here you can add some more medium range or more ECM, so R-77s and ECM pods. And that way we have 4 R-37s for 9 kilometer range engagements, and we have 4 R-77s for 7 kilometer range engagements, and we have a decent amount of ECM and other countermeasures. So the survivability of this plane, together with its speed being 900 kilometers per hour, faster than most American jets, just not having any stealth does hurt, but still, this is a really good fighter and is definitely going to do some damage. Now, in terms of stealth planes, the Russian side has the Su-57, which can be outfitted with 4 R-37s, or a mixed loadout containing 2 R-37s, 3 R-77s, and 2 R-73s for long, mid, and short range capabilities. So let's move on to long range tactical weaponry. While it comes to seed, the Russians have a lot of options. The main seed missile that the Russians have is the Kh-58 USHK with a range of 8 kilometers, which is fired from the Su-57, MiG-35, and the Su-25SM. The Russians also have the Kh-31P, which has a range of 7 kilometers and can be fired from the Su-34, Su-24MP, and the Su-25T. In terms of helicopters that can carry seed, we have the Ka-52 Ketran that can be outfitted with the Kh-31P missiles. In terms of cruise missiles, the list is quite interesting. We have the Tu-142, which can fire 8, and the Tu-22, which can fire 3 cruise missiles. These vary slightly in terms of damage they deal, so keep that in mind when you decide which one you want to use. You can also carry cruise missiles, but I personally find it a waste to use a stealth plane like this purely for cruise missiles when you could just save up for a Tu-160, which could be used to fire 12 of them. I will also have a deck building guide eventually, so I won't really go into which loadout is best for which plane, since that would make this a very lengthy video. In terms of smart bombs, dumb bombs, high drag bombs, the same principles apply to the Russian weaponry, so remember the hotkeys and use them in the same way. It works exactly the same. Now, in terms of air-to-ground missiles, the Americans have the Mavericks, but the Russians have more to choose from. For example, Su-25T can be outfitted with the Vickers ATGMs, or Kh-25ML air-to-ground missiles. Other air-to-ground missiles also exist, such as the Kh-38ML, and the common consensus here with the KH missiles is that you set up a strafing run, and the plane will perform a gun run and also use the KH missiles if there's a target that it can engage with it, and whatever it hits, it is going to fully delete that unit. So I'm gonna keep it short for this one. I am going to make a follow-up video to this video detailing really how to use certain planes, such as the opening dogfights that pretty much happens in every match. I will detail how to use your plane because you kind of want to maneuver it. You want to change altitude, kick in afterburner, shut down afterburner, use extra flares, etc, etc. But I really want to keep all of those more scenario based tutorials in one separate video to keep the overview a bit more manageable here. So closing thoughts, when choosing an air superiority fighter, ask yourself, do you need stealth? Do you want lots of missiles? Do you want long range? And are you intercepting bombers, or are you going to be a dogfighter? So once you understand what you want and how you want to play with your fighters, but also what you want to target eventually, the right plane becomes obvious. Let me know in the comments if you like a part 2 on multi-role planes, bombers or cruise missile carriers, how to use those. I will definitely try to touch upon everything you guys mentioned. If you want tips for anti-air defense and how to counter aircraft, I might also break that down, or a breakdown of combined arms airstrike using recon and laser designation. That could also be another topic for another video. But if this helped, leave a like, hit subscribe, it really does help the channel grow, and thank you for watching.